Dragger, an original novel by Robert Napier, narration and images powered by AI. Dragger, an original novel by Robert Napier, narration and images powered by AI. Chapter 14. A lot of words. Dex rode behind the pirate captain, while the other three, Rowan, Arlu, and Boo, had their own mounts. Lo acted as though they were in danger, and Dex didn't question that, what with the sawjaws and wild animals lurking about. But she felt the greatest uneasiness at the fact they were riding away from Gnarlstead. She couldn't help but wonder what a river captain was doing out on the moors, how they had somehow met with the missing slaves, and why they had brought extra runkas. The delta is called Junlun, or Ogijun's twins. It's where the two rivers, Arvindur and Hurin, diverge off of the Ogijun River, and their separate paths form the boundaries of Jodah, the zone between the Crush and the Joseon empires. That was Rowan's answer, but Dex hardly recollected the question. Her mind was reeling with worry and terror. There was no escape from Gnarlstead. She'd always known that. Everybody knew that. She had gotten caught up in a daydream, like one of Trek's stories where people can win sometimes, even if it's by mistake. That's not how Gnarlstead works. She couldn't understand how she let herself be so stupid, and how she could listen to this man's stupidity. She remembered her question, and she spoke it again, involuntarily. How did I get into this? Rowan took her quite literally and continued. The fortress of the Deltaic Legion sits on a low bluff along the edge of the Arvindur. From there, Commander Dweller and his legion patrolled the border. It was nearly dusk by the time the Crushan forces amassed on the riverbank. You sound just like him. Dex sniffled in the cold. Trek, I mean. How so? You talk with a lot of words. How did you meet him? We were both alone. Well, except for Runty, but they never met. He was too heavy. Rowan had no idea what that meant, but he was encouraged to hear about his lost friend. Can you tell me what happened that night in Nethertyne, when we separated? I don't really remember. I was just a kid back then. Of course, I was asking myself the very same thing that night. How did I get into this mess? I still don't know. Dex nodded sullenly as they continued through the misty marshes. Why didn't you come back for us? Commander Dweller, I mean. He said you were his most loyal friend. Rowan turned away and took a while to find an answer. Well, I have, don't you see? Here I am. I've come back. Only it took longer than I hoped, but I have come back. What took you so long? Snorted Dex. Aren't you a knight? Don't you have castles and things? Rowan stammered, stung by her obvious misapprehension of just about everything. Yes. Well, despite its grandiose name, the Deltaic fortress is essentially two towers with a wall around them and a barracks in between. That morning, when I reached the walls, soaking wet, winded, wounded, ragged, and alone, totally exhausted from swimming across the river. After the Crushans destroyed the bridge, I banged on the gate and got no response. I shouted, "Up in arms, lads! Sharpen your sticks! We've come to it!" I banged again. Rowan paused to remind Dex of the scar on his arm. Finally, the gate began to clatter. Then I saw the place was deserted. A woman whistled from behind the gate, made a sharp turn in military fashion, and confronted me. It was Dr. Arlu, arms on her hips, cheeks all puffed up. She was the fort physician back then. Well, where is everybody? Arlu clapped her hands together and waved toward the horizon. What do you mean? They're gone? She pointed at the smoke and jogged in place. Don't get sarcastic. What are you talking about? What are you doing here then? Arlu pointed to herself and the ground. Yeah? You stayed? Or they left you behind, more like? She replied with a rude sound and trudged off toward the kitchen. I suddenly remembered I still had half an arrow shaft in my forearm. Hey, where are you going? Help me with my arm, I called after her. We've got work to do. Arlu made her way to the larder. I cursed this and that, holding up my arm, still bleeding. I slumped down at the table in the kitchen. Arlu snacked on the abandoned food and bandaged my arm with a cheesecloth. We'd lost dozens of knights and legionnaires. The soldiers that we left to guard the outpost were Dons. They deserted it when they realized the crush were rolling in. When the bandage was complete, I struggled up the wall to look over the landscape. I saw the Crushan soldiers swarming over the area, their countless campfires, and Nethertine still smoking across the river. No telling whether Commander Dweller was alive or dead. That pompous, self-righteous, arrogant bastard. This is all his fault. I told him not to chase those damn traitors. Now look at this mess. What are the Crushans up to now? But I remembered my duty. I remembered how many times Commander Dweller saved my ass. Just then, Arlu spotted a caravan of Dons moving towards the fortress. I had to send a message and tell the Emperor what was happening. Come on, I said. We'll convince these travelers to deliver a message. Once they see the outpost is in danger, they'll be glad to help us. I shouted to the convoy from the battlement. Up here, hey, come quickly. I peered over the battlement at the travelers. As they grew nearer, I heard faint metallic scraping and clanking amid the otherwise deathly silent crew. The caravan passed under me through the gate that, in my haste, I had left open. Arlu, coming off the wall, approached the caravan as they entered the drill square. She just managed to emit one of her EEP before she was set upon and brought to the ground by heavy hands. Out of the wagons jumped several Sawjaws. They cast off their Don cloaks and trappings as they fell upon the doctor with strange and complex weapons. Their faces were shrouded, so only their unnatural eyes could be seen. They hissed and grunted as they heaved Arlu, kicking violently, onto their shoulders and carried her to the wagon. I ran down the steps to meet them, but I was also overwhelmed, wounded as I was. As the sky ever darkened, the Sawjaws carried us out of the gate to their wagon. They bound us with ropes and vines. Inside the covered wagon, Arlu rubbed her head and felt around the floor. There were dead animals and sharp things strewn about. I scrambled up to Arlu and embraced her. We're screwed, I said. Do you think they'll skin us? I've heard that Sawjaws like to skin people. Arlu barely responded, as if to say probably. Anyway, it was a shitty day all around, but matters would only get worse. Dex didn't decide right away how she felt about Rowan's story. It fit neatly with what Trek had told her, but it wasn't enough. Not nearly enough to explain why life was so miserable for everyone. But why would Sawjaws attack the outpost? She asked, thinking only of Vegas and how kind he had been. Just as there are good, honest men among the Jozen and the Dons, even the Crush, I suppose. There are bandits and outlaws among the Jinn. You can never know whether what is known of those that you know can be known of those who are unknown or not. I urge you to keep that in mind, little one. After they took us far into the weirder, wilder parts of their God-forgotten swamp, we were deposited, along with others, in a deep and muddy pit, with water up to our chests. Arlu interrupted, using her hand to show the water was up to her chin. Arlu and I were half-starved, taunted, and ignored. After a day or so, rumor spread that the Sawjaw slavers were in possession of a Vinian knight. Such is the renown and reputation of our order that swampers and pirates came from all corners to see this most fearsome warrior. Myself, I mean. I was fished from the pit and thrown into the arena. In a stone ring amid the mire and stranglers, I was forced to fight against any challenger that sought to prove their prowess. Of course, this would have been a simple task for me, welcome even, if not for my wounded arm and uncomfortable accommodations. However, I was able to use this disadvantage to secure release for Dr. Arlu out of the pit, so that she might be allowed to refresh my bandages. And did she thank me? Of course not. She immediately set about carousing and drinking with our very captors. From the back of her runka, Arlu offered absolutely no contradiction. Despite these hardships, I was able to handily defeat the local challengers and convince our hosts that with some more time, rest, and provisions, I could provide entertainment and profit. I dare say this went on for many months, I fighting 3, 5, 7 challengers a day, all before an increasing crowd of gamblers and ruffians. All the while, I worked to ingratiate myself to our hosts and find a way to escape. Arlu, on the other hand, was completely useless. She seemed to enjoy her captivity, drinking, smoking, even betting against me on occasion, and would even treat the very wounds of my challengers. Dex listened quietly, as was her way, but didn't understand much of what Rowan said. She did understand the pit and the arena, as she imagined them as the sty and the thrash. This only seemed to confirm what Father said, that the world was cruel and violent, and he only wished to prepare his children for some horrifying thing called reality. Now feats of battle had attracted the attention of the Riverine raiders, who came from Slow Smile to witness and take part in the spectacle. Because even the swampers recognized Jozen nobility, I had secured for myself a hut and cot and some simple cookware so that I was almost a member of their tribe. Nevertheless, they always kept 2 guards outside, as if any 2 swampers could stop a Vinian knight. "Ah, bullshit," scoffed Losano under her wide-brimmed hat. "If you could have escaped any time, why'd you wait? When I found you, you were sickly, skinny, and desperate, like a stray pup." As I was saying, the Sawjaw fight pit was the perfect hideout while I planned my next move. But my martial prowess had attracted mobs of outlaws and brigands. I knew it was only a matter of time before the Crush found out I was living among the swampers. After the raiders had failed to produce a worthy champion, I was reclining in my tent, waiting for the next round, when Captain Sano appeared with a proposition. "Oh my God," Lo threw back her head. "You are so full of shit. God, you were in a bamboo cage, bleeding and sweating when I took pity on you." I immediately recognized her as a former associate of my sister Morwen. Before taking the title of Lady Dweller, she had a peculiar fascination with misadventures and lowlifes. Seeing the good captain was in need of my help, I abandoned my previous plan and embarked on a mission to Taloran. "Did you come to see the Vinian?" Dex asked Lo. "I'll tell you exactly what I told Ro. It was Morwan. She arranged the whole thing. Soon as she got word the fortress was overrun and her brother and husband were missing, she took action. But the Emperor forbade her, Lady of House Dweller, from raising an army and marching into the valley. So she goes round and hires the deadliest, most cunning, daring, misadventurous lowlife that money can buy." "It was her," said Rowan. "Sano is talking about herself." "You bet your ass. I had to make a bargain with the Sawjaw Prince, but I was able to purchase Sir Walker pretty cheap, barely put a dent in that Dweller fortune. Sawjaws wanted to keep Doc Arlu, though, and I think she wanted to stay. She had them fanning her with fronds, eating hackberries in a hammock." Arlu nodded. "Sometime after that," continued Rowan, "we arrived in Taloran. I'll take you there someday. It's practically heaven. Gardens, libraries, bathhouses, forums, shrines, a theater comparable to Cajitos." "Even I have to admit, kid," said Lo, "it ain't bad. Pubs and brothels up and down every street, dice and blanks, sill dens, clothiers, world-famous armorers, toy shops, and taverns." "I'd like to go there," said Dex. She meant it sincerely, but was having trouble showing enthusiasm as she felt certain Father's retaliation was close at hand. Sensing her waning resolve, Rowan felt it prudent to close out his summation of events. After many months of waiting for an audience, we were unable to even speak with Count Stern, who supposedly rules Joda. We finally met with Councilman Braith, the acting Jozen ambassador. He graciously explained to us that the Empire could not come to the rescue, and that there were conflicting accounts of the incident at Nethertyne, and that he had spoken with the Crucian representative who found evidence Commander Dweller attacked without provocation. The official ruling of the inquiry, scoffed Lowe. Commander Dweller is accused of war crimes and, if located, is to be escorted to Taloran for trial. The truth is, added Rowan, that Stern and the Dons are all afraid of the Crush. Not the Crush, said Lowe quickly and quietly. They're afraid of Dragger, afraid of his ghouls. They're afraid of their own shadows.
Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe.